The first time I heard the ocean call, it wasn't a voice. It wasn't even a sound. It was a feeling. A tug deep in my chest that yanked me towards something I couldn't quite explain. Something wild. Something dangerous. At 18, I should have been worried about my future. College, a decent job, the sort of predictable life my parents had mapped out for me. But I couldn't stop hearing it. The call. And it didn't care about my plans. It didn't care that I wasn't ready. I answered. And now, here I am. Captain Evelyn Brooks of Oil Rig 42. A metal island floating miles off the coast, anchored to nothing but the relentless waves and the unpredictable moods of the sea. A job I never thought I'd take, but somehow, the ocean always wins. If you're already feeling the tension building, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the story so far. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button to join the Creepypasta HQ family, where chilling tales like this are waiting to haunt you every week. Don't miss out on what comes next. Trust me, you won't want to. I've spent the last 15 years trying to make sense of this place. And when I look back, I still don't know if I'm living the dream, or if I've somehow gotten lost in it. I don't belong in a city. I don't belong in an office. I don't belong in anything that has walls. The sound of people's voices always seemed so suffocating, their expectations heavier than the concrete around me. It was the silence of the sea I needed, the vast emptiness that felt like freedom. The isolation, its sharp, cold bite, it made sense. The rig is my sanctuary, and I know it's the same for most of the crew here. They don't come out of a sense of duty or pride. They come because they, too, can hear the ocean's call. Only, it's a call that's hard to explain, let alone understand. Most people think it's a lonely job. And it is. But when the sun sets over the horizon and the ocean gleams under the fire of an orange sky, there's a quiet, indescribable peace in knowing you're out there, on your own. Just you, the crew, and the sea. But peace has a price. In my case, the price is understanding the rules. And the first rule you learn on Rig 42 is never question the ocean. Never. It sounds absurd, I know. How can anyone be that terrified of something they don't fully understand? I used to laugh at it too. I was young once, full of idealism. It's just water, I'd think. It's just waves. But that was before I saw the fish. Before the shadows beneath the water began to move. Before the storms came out of nowhere, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Before the crew members started disappearing. Before I realized the ocean wasn't just something you crossed. It was something you had to respect. Something that demanded your absolute submission. And then I understood. Rig 42 isn't a job. It's a test. A test that's meant to break you, to push you to the edge, to challenge your very sanity. But if you can handle it, if you can withstand the weight of that pressure, that isolation, that relentless challenge, there's a reward. A reward that only those who've spent years at sea can truly appreciate. The crew here, they're my family. The kind of family you can't choose. The kind of family that's shaped by the ocean, by the hardships we face. Every face here tells a story, each one as bruised and weathered as the next. The sea has a way of carving you down to your bare bones. Take Miko, for example. He was just a kid when he first signed on, eyes wide with excitement and ambition. I remember telling him that the ocean had a way of eating those things up and spitting them back out. Miko's smile didn't fade. Now, he's not just my mechanic, he's my confidant. He's the one who fixes what breaks and keeps everything running smoothly. He doesn't say much, but when he does, you listen. Then there's Trish, the only woman on the rig who can match me drink for drink and curse louder than the storm that threatens to tear us apart every time we work in the depths of the sea. She's strong, unrelenting, and sharp, but it's her quiet moments I've come to respect the most. When the wind howls and the waves crash harder than usual, Trish becomes something else. Still, almost like she's listening, watching. I'm not a complicated person. I've never been the type to sit and dwell on things. Life on the rig requires something simpler: decisive action, unwavering leadership, and a level of responsibility that most can't grasp. You're responsible for the safety of the crew, the integrity of the rig, and if something goes wrong, the lives that could be lost in an instant. When I first stepped on board, I was just like every other rookie. I thought it was just another job, another paycheck. But this This life, it molds you, shapes you into something tougher, something more resilient, more aware. The ocean forces you to open your eyes, to see things others can't. The wind picks up, snapping my jacket against my side as I stand at the edge of the rig. My boots press into the steel, cold and hard, but it's a feeling I've come to rely on, especially when the sea starts to change its mind. The water is darker tonight, heavier, and the clouds above roll in fast, unnaturally so. Captain? Miko's voice breaks through the air, pulling me from my thoughts. He's standing by the entrance to the control room, his face etched with concern. I know that look. It's the one he wears when something's about to go wrong. What's it now? I ask, though I already know the answer. I don't need him to say it. The tension in the air, the feeling in my gut, it's always the same when the storm is close. Something's off, he says, his voice steady. The systems aren't responding. It's like the rig's fighting us. I nod. I know. And just like that, I feel it. That familiar tug. The one I've ignored for years. The one I hoped would stay buried. But now here it is, rising to the surface. The ocean is speaking again. The feeling isn't the same as it used to be. It's darker now, more insistent. I turn to Miko. Get everyone on deck. We need to prepare. This isn't just a storm. He hesitates, but only for a moment. Aye, Captain. As he turns to leave, I find myself wondering how many of them know what they're truly up against. How many of them understand that this isn't just a storm? That this is the beginning of something much, much worse. Something the ocean doesn't give up easily. When the first drop of rain hits my face, I feel it. The storm is here. The rig creaks under the weight of the water. The wind howls louder, tearing through everything, dragging us with it. The ocean moves in a way I've never felt before, as if it's alive, awake, and angry. And somewhere, beneath all of it, the call grows louder. It's not a voice, not a sound. It's a pull. A pull I've spent my entire life trying to ignore. But now, it's too late. The ocean is calling, and it won't stop until it has what it wants. The storm hit like an animal in the dark, snapping its jaws and thrashing through the rig without a second thought. The wind tore at my coat, yanked at my hair, and I could barely hear the men shouting orders over the howling gusts. But I knew. I felt it deep in my bones. This wasn't just a typical storm. This wasn't the kind of fury the sea sends when she's angry. No, this was something else entirely. Something older, more primal. I've spent years out here. I've seen storms that could break you in half, felt waves that could swallow a rig whole. But there's a difference when the ocean isn't just throwing punches. When she's trying to teach you a lesson. I turned toward Miko as he sprinted back to the control room, the rain slashing down hard enough to sting the skin. His face was grim, like he knew too. Captain, we need to get inside, he shouted over the wind, pointing toward the control room with urgency. I nodded once, my mind already racing. I had a duty to the crew, whether they knew what they were up against or not. But there was something in the air tonight, something wrong, something that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't quite shake. Everyone get below deck, I yelled to the men gathered on the rig, though I could barely hear myself over the storm. Now, we need to prepare for this. But even as I said it, I knew. There was no preparing for something like this. The control room was chaos. Miko was already at the helm, hands moving over the dials and screens, but even he looked rattled. Trish was there too, her eyes scanning the monitors, her lips pressed into a thin line. Captain, she started, but her voice trailed off. Her gaze was fixed on the monitor, eyes narrowed like she was trying to make sense of a puzzle that didn't fit. The storm outside was only getting worse. The rain, now pouring in torrents, blurred the window and made it hard to see the horizon. The rig groaned under the pressure of the waves crashing into it. I knew the men below deck were in danger, but there was no way we could leave the control room yet. We needed to understand what was happening. What's going on, Miko? I asked, though I already had a sick feeling in my gut. He didn't respond right away, his fingers moving with a sort of frantic energy as he tried to make sense of the numbers flashing on the screen. The pressure's too much, Miko muttered, his voice low. He glanced up at me. Captain, something's wrong. The systems are failing. The rig's integrity, it's compromised. The current. He didn't need to finish. I could see it too. The rig was shaking beneath us, groaning like a wounded animal, and the lights were flickering like they were about to go out completely. Something was wrong with the systems, worse than just a storm. We were being tested. The ocean wasn't just angry tonight, she was hunting. "Trish, take the helm. I need to check the rig," I said. I didn't wait for her to answer, already moving toward the door. The moment I stepped outside, I could feel it, the oppressive weight of the storm pressing down on me. The wind was unbearable, but it wasn't the wind that bothered me. It was the silence beneath it. The ocean was too quiet. It felt like it was holding its breath, like something was waiting, watching. I forced myself to focus. I had a job to do. The crew's lives were in my hands, and I wasn't about to let them down. I moved quickly, checking each station, making sure everything was secure. There were no signs of any damage yet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, lurking beneath the surface. The ocean had always been unpredictable, but tonight, it felt alive. It wasn't a storm. It was something more. Something that had been here long before the rig, long before any of us. I was back in the control room in minutes, my breath heavy as I struggled to keep my focus. I looked to Trish. "Anything?" She shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. "No, Captain, the systems are still glitching. It's like we're being interfered with, like something's reaching inside the rig trying to control it." "Control it?" I repeated, narrowing my eyes. "How?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice tense. "But something's trying to take over. I can feel it." I stood there for a moment, trying to piece it all together. The storm, the strange behavior of the rig, the feeling that something was out there, watching, waiting. And then it hit me. The fish. "Get everyone on high alert," I snapped, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "I need to get back to the deck." The moment I stepped outside again, I knew. The water was darker than it should have been. Almost black. A deep abyss that stretched out farther than my eyes could see. And in the distance, just beneath the surface, something moved. Something unnatural. I ran toward the edge of the rig, my boots slipping on the slick steel as the storm lashed against me. The waves were rising, crashing violently against the sides of the rig, but I wasn't focused on that. I was focused on what I saw in the water. A ripple. A shadow moving underneath the surface, something long and dark, gliding through the water with eerie precision. "Captain!" Miko's voice came through the radio, sharp and urgent. "We've got a breach. The southern side's coming apart. We're losing pressure. You need to get back here. Now." I didn't hesitate. I turned on my heel and sprinted back toward the control room, the air thick with a sense of urgency I couldn't ignore. But even as I ran, I could feel it. The ocean wasn't just punishing us for being here. It was testing us. And we were failing. I burst through the control room door, breathless, but I didn't have time for pleasantries. "What's the status?" I demanded. Miko was at the station, his eyes wide as he stared at the screen. "The rig, it's not responding. The hull's compromised. I can't hold it together much longer. Damn it!" I slammed my fist against the console. "We're not going down like this. We need to stabilize. Trish, what's our fuel supply?" "Limited," she said, her voice strained. "We're running low, Captain. If this keeps up, we'll be drifting." I stared at the readouts, my mind working furiously. We couldn't lose power. We couldn't lose control. Not now. Not when we were so close to the edge. But then, just as I was about to make another command, the rig shook again, harder this time, and the lights went out. The entire room plunged into darkness. The only sounds were the howling wind, the distant crash of waves, and the pounding of my own heartbeat in my chest. And then, silence. An unnatural, all-consuming silence. I could feel it in my gut. It wasn't the storm that had caused this. It was something else. Something I couldn't name, but something that had been waiting, patient, deep beneath the surface. Something that was finally rising. The silence was suffocating. I had learned to embrace the sound of the ocean, the constant hum, the rhythm of the waves crashing against the rig. But now, there was nothing. Not even the wind howling. I fumbled for the emergency lights, the small red beams struggling to cut through the darkened room. The control room, once a chaotic mess of flashing lights and buzzing screens, was eerily still. "Captain?" Trish's voice echoed faintly in the dark. She sounded distant, unsure. What the hell just happened? I didn't know. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything I had seen, everything I had felt. Something was wrong, and it was getting worse. The rig's systems were completely down. No lights, no power. The only thing left was the unnerving sound of water lapping at the steel hull. And then, something else. A sound beneath the waves. A low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, and close. I glanced at Miko. He was staring at the monitors, his face pale. "Captain," he whispered, voice trembling. "There's something on the radar, but it doesn't make sense. It's moving, beneath us." I didn't need to ask what he meant. I could feel it too. The ocean wasn't calm anymore. It wasn't just waiting. It was watching. It was alive. My gut twisted as I looked toward the steel walls of the control room. The ocean had always been an entity of its own, wild and untamable. But tonight, it felt different. It felt intentional, like it had been waiting, like it had been watching us all along. The hum beneath the rig grew louder, stronger, a vibration now deep in my chest, as if the rig itself were trembling in fear. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the hum stopped. I froze. No one moved, no one spoke. And then, as though on cue, the lights flickered back on. The screens buzzed to life, their bright glare jarring against the darkness we had just come from. The control room, once lifeless, was suddenly filled with static. And in the haze of flickering lights, I saw something on the monitor, a shape. Something beneath the waves. Something enormous. It was no fish, no creature I had ever seen. Its form was dark, shifting, impossible to define, but unmistakable in its size. Is that the storm?" Miko whispered, his voice breaking as he watched the shape move closer to the rig. "No," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper, a chilling realization seeping into my bones. "It's not the storm. It wasn't the wind or the rain or the waves that had caused the rig to break down. It wasn't the forces of nature. The storm had been a distraction, a curtain that had drawn us in, keeping us unaware of what had been lurking beneath the surface all along. This wasn't the ocean's fury. It was something else." The shape on the screen pulsed again, growing closer, moving with an intelligence I couldn't comprehend. The radar went wild, beeping erratically as it approached, and then silence again. Not the comforting quiet of the ocean, but an unnatural stillness that felt like a void. The hum, the pulse, the water, everything had gone still. The lights went out. The air in the control room grew heavy, like the very atmosphere was pressing in, suffocating us, drowning us in its absence. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, I couldn't even hear. And then, a voice. It was faint at first, barely audible over the static. A voice, human, but twisted, stretched out of time and place. It whispered from the depths as though it were coming from the very walls of the rig itself. "We are not what you thought." The words lingered in the air like a poison, infecting everything they touched. "We are not the storm." And then, the ground beneath us shook. The steel walls of the rig screamed in protest as something powerful and unseen slammed against them. The sound was deafening, a deep groan from the very core of the earth, as if the ocean was trying to swallow the rig whole. I stumbled backward, my legs unsteady, as I heard the metal walls bend and crack under the pressure. The scream of the rig echoed in my ears. My pulse raced. This was it, the end. But then, just as quickly, the shaking stopped. A low whisper, soft and close to my ear. "You should have listened." The lights flickered back on, but there was no time to react. The control room door, once solid, suddenly buckled inward with a deafening crash. Water poured through the opening as though it had been waiting for that exact moment. My chest tightened as the cold, dark water surged into the room, flooding the space, drowning the machines and the screens in its depths. And in the midst of the chaos, there was nothing left but silence. A thick, suffocating silence that enveloped the rig, drowning us in its weight. The water was still. It was as though nothing had ever happened, like the ocean had returned to its peaceful state, indifferent to the destruction it had caused. I looked around the room, gasping for air, but the faces of my crew were gone. The monitors were empty. The rig, once bustling with life and noise, was now a tomb, silent and hollow. And I was alone, alone in the cold grip of the ocean, trapped beneath its endless surface. I stepped toward the window, pressing my hand against the glass, staring out into the inky blackness. And there, beneath the water, I saw it again. The shape, the thing that had been watching. It wasn't just a creature. It was something more. Something ancient, something that had been here long before the first rig was ever built. And I realized then that it wasn't just the rig it wanted. It wanted us. The last thought that passed through my mind was a chilling one. We are never alone. If you made it this far, you know that the ocean holds secrets far darker than any storm could ever reveal. But is the horror truly over? Or is there something deeper lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the next unlucky soul? If you enjoyed this story and want to dive deeper into the mystery of Rig 42, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a chilling tale. The ocean is calling, and its secrets are waiting to be uncovered. Are you brave enough to listen? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is still out there? And remember, sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we can't see. Stay tuned and stay safe.